Hello, and thank you to everyone who has taken the time to join us from throughout the United States and around the world as we continue our 2023 webinar series. My name is Cameron McElhenney, and I serve as the Executive Director of the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. NACOLE is an organization that works to create a community of support for independent civilian oversight entities that seek to make their local law enforcement agencies, jails, and prisons more transparent, accountable, and responsive to the communities they serve. One piece of that effort is our webinar series, where for the last 8 years, we have worked to bring you information on effective practices in civilian oversight, innovations in the field, and important work being done in regards to criminal justice reform. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics regarding today's session. With so many of you in attendance, everyone has entered in listen-only mode. However, once today's presentation begins, you can access the area to type in your questions by clicking the Q&A icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You will also have the ability to vote on questions as they are posed by your fellow attendees to move them up in the queue. This will help us to address the most pressing questions in the short time we have together today. I also wanted to remind you that today's session is being recorded and will be available to you through the Attendee Hub, the same platform you have just signed into to access today's live session. Your same login information will allow you to watch or rewatch the session shortly after we conclude. Therefore, please save the link to use in the future. You can also use the Attendee Hub to add future sessions to your schedule. We do have one more session left this year, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for that one as well. With the details out of the way, I would like to move on to today's session. I'm very excited for both today's session and to welcome NACOLE's new Director of Training and Education, Dr. Tina Barr, who joined our team in August. She first became involved with civilian oversight of law enforcement in 2019 as a member of a grassroots organization in Fayetteville, North Carolina. That spearheaded efforts to establish an independent oversight entity in the city. Immediately before joining the NACOLE team, Tina was an assistant professor of social work at Hood College, and prior to that, at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Tina's academic work has focused primarily on issues related to wrongful conviction, but she has also studied interpersonal violence and physical and mental health disparities among racial and ethnic groups. Tina has extensive experience working in social work, public health, training, and research capacities with nonprofit organizations, state governments, and private companies. We feel very lucky to have her as part of NACOLE and the oversight community, and to have her here today to discuss this very important topic. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Tina.
Thank you, Cami. And thank you everyone for attending today, as well as the work that you do in oversight. I hope the information that I present today will be helpful to you in your roles, whether you're serving on a board or commission, whether you're a staff person providing support to an entity, or even if you're not at any of those roles and are just interested in possibly forming an oversight entity and just want to learn more. I will point out that today's webinar is about the group's processes, dynamics, and stages of development. So it's more about the process of working with groups as opposed to the nitty-gritty details of what you should be doing as a member of a civilian oversight entity. But everything that we talk about today definitely applies to oversight groups, boards, commissions, as well as any other type of group that you might be on. So with that being said, let me get started with the overview of what I'll be covering today. The first thing I'll talk about is low functioning versus high functioning groups. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I want to spend most of my time during the next 45 to 50 minutes or so on the stages of group development. I'll focus on 4 stages, and for each of those phases, I will talk about the common behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that are exhibited and observed by group members, as well as what the group needs during each stage and what leadership qualities are important to have during each stage. I'll finish up the webinar talking briefly about various roles that group members take on, formally and informally as parts of groups. I have the little visual you see on the right side of this slide. It's a little mechanism you might see in a machine or a watch or something of that sort. But when I think about groups, I think of a dynamic moving entity, right? There are a lot of people, different personalities, bringing different life experiences, professional experiences, cultural aspects. Everybody who's a part of a group is bringing their unique selves to the group, and they're expected to contribute to the group. Because like the gears that you see and the cogs intertwining in the little visual, it's working smoothly. However, if a cog malfunctions or a gear breaks down, if something happens, then that gear that you see turning smoothly will cease to function properly, right? So it needs to be attended to. Similarly, when you're working with a group, every member has to contribute to the group process, to group efforts, to getting the work done. If someone does not contribute to the group, then it can cause a quote unquote malfunction in the group. The group will not operate as effectively as it can if everyone is contributing. Getting started with characteristics of low functioning groups. I'm sure that everyone on this webinar has been a part of a group in some form or another, whether it was at work, whether it was when you were a student in school, in college, and I know some of people serving on oversight entities are still furthering their education. So any type of group that you've been a part of, you've probably experienced both characteristics of low functioning groups and high functioning groups as well. This list is not exhaustive, but it does highlight some of the more common things that we see when we're working with a group that is not necessarily operating at its optimal level. In these such groups, there is confusion about roles, responsibilities, and assignments. And so individual members may be confused about what their role is and what they're supposed to do, and if they're given an assignment, how to carry that out. They also might be confused about other group members' roles, responsibilities as well. Low functioning groups, there may be conflict or hostility among group members, which we all know can be very detrimental to getting any of the work done. We might see apathy and a lack of involvement by group members. And so with oversight entity, this, as well as other groups, this might look like not attending meetings or community outreach events, or if they're attending meetings and outreach events, not necessarily contributing in the moment or being present in the moment, okay? If assignments are given to individual group members, they may not actually carry out or fulfill those assignments. We might also see that when decisions are made, not all members fully understand those decisions, why they were made, how the decisions were arrived at, and also when decisions are made, there may be no follow-up in carrying out what's required in that decision. Meetings may be ineffective, right? So there may not be an agenda, or the agenda may not be stuck to during the meeting. Inadequate amounts of times may be assigned to different items on the agenda, okay? Work does not get done. So if we see all of the aforementioned characteristics occurring, then that is prohibitive in the group meeting its goals and objectives. And so work may not actually be getting done, or very little bit of the work may be getting done. And if all of this is happening, then it would not be surprising if there are complaints. It can be internal complaints from group members themselves, or the complaints can be coming from outside entities. For example, with oversight, communities, citizens, if they're not satisfied with how a group is functioning, they don't see the productivity, then there can be complaints from them as well as other groups and individuals. That's a lot of bad news, but the good news is that low functioning groups, or groups that are currently ineffective, can actually become higher functioning groups. So it is not a doomed situation. Turning attention to characteristics of high functioning groups, just as if you've served on a group that you've experienced some of those previous qualities. If you've ever worked on a group that is functioning at a high level, you will have some very memorable experiences. It is a pleasure to work on these groups. You feel satisfaction. So here are some of the more common characteristics of these groups. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but there's clarity. So individuals are clear on what their roles are, their responsibilities, the overall purpose, objective, goals of the group itself. And there's clarity on who else is doing what and responsible for what within the group. There is cooperation among group members. People can successfully and productively work together, and people support one another and are willing to reach out and help each other. There's a higher level of trust involved. People are more motivated and involved in the group process. So people show up for meetings, and while they're there, they actively contribute. If people are given assignments, they fulfill those assignments without much prodding or reminders to do so. There's constructive critiques, and that goes both ways. Individual members are okay and feel comfortable with giving feedback and constructive critique, as well as receiving it. Meetings are effective, work gets done, and resultingly, there's a high level of satisfaction among group members. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the stages of group development. Some of you may have heard of these 4 stages, or Tuckman's stages of group development. Tuckman was an educational psychologist, professor of educational psychology. His full name is Bruce Wayne Tuckman. So for all you Batman fans out there, yes, his actual name is Bruce Wayne Tuckman. Dr. Tuckman, from 1963 to 65, he was a research psychologist at the Naval Medical Research Institute. So while he was here, based on his research and studies that he was doing around group dynamics and organizational development, he coined the phrases that you see here: forming, storming, norming, and performing. And this is where I'm going to spend the bulk of my time in upcoming slides. There is a 5th stage that he added in the mid-70s, which is adjourning. I am not going to focus on that stage as a part of this webinar. But essentially, Dr. Tuckman based these stages of group development all on the premise, the idea that the success of a group depends on the relationships between its members, right? So the structure is important. Understanding what needs to be done is important. There are many things that are important in a group process. Before we can even get to the work and the structure and everything else, though, Tuckman believed that you have to be intentional about forming the relationships among group members. I'll point out that although you see the arrows between the different stages here, this is not necessarily a linear process. It can be a linear process. However, a group may get to, say, for example, the 3rd phase, the norming phase, and may be operating there, but something happens with the group or external to the group, and then it gets kicked back to a previous stage. Okay? So just keep that in mind. It'll make more sense as I'm going on to the individual stages. So the first stage, forming. This stage is all about the process of putting the group together, putting the structure in place, getting everyone on the same page. Some of the common behaviors that group members might exhibit, again, this is not an exhaustive list, and none of the lists you see during this webinar are exhaustive, but some of the common behaviors you might see. And let me ask you to do this as you're listening. Just think about a time when you became a member of a group, whether it was an existing group or whether it was you and other people coming together to form the group. So as I'm talking about the different stages, and this one in particular, think about how you felt during that time, right? During the forming stage, it's common for people to feel each other out, right? Group members are just meeting each other for the first time. So you're doing some work and trying to figure out who people are, what's going on. right? So your interactions may be more polite and tentative than if you were more comfortable and had gotten to know these people, right? Tentativeness, that may look like you may hesitate or not be totally comfortable at this stage of the process, stating your thoughts and opinions, and even in the way you interact with people, because you don't know how they might receive something, right? Group members are seeking clarity at this point. All right, you may have a general sense of what the group exists or why it exists and what the purpose is. However, seeking clarity about the details and specifics of the group. What exactly are you doing? What are other members doing? Give me more information about how we fulfill our obligations, those sorts of things. In this stage, members look more towards the leadership of the group for direction and guidance. And this tapers off if the group successfully moves through the different stages. At this group, kind of going along with the politeness and tentativeness, people are avoiding conflict and controversies, oftentimes at all costs, because they don't know how people will react. So you might also see cliques forming. So as people are getting to know each other, just this is natural human nature, people feel more people who they feel more comfortable with, who they're jibing with, they may form a little clique among themselves. And because this is the forming process, there might be low task completion because you have not yet gotten to actually getting to the work itself. Common thoughts and feelings. This can be marked by ambiguity. So again, thinking about when you formed a group for the first time or joined a group initially, you might have mixed feelings. On one hand, you might be very excited and optimistic and ready to get to work. But on the other hand, you might be a little hesitant, might be a certain level of anxiety because everything is so new and you're getting to know each other. And you also might be skeptical or suspicious about other group members, especially if you're serving on with a group that's coming from very different places, okay? You might ask questions like, why are they here? Who are they? What is their intention? You yourself might be asking questions about, why am I here? What is my responsibility? Am I going to stick with this? And will I fit in? So turning my attention to group needs and then leadership requirements. At this point, because of all of the ambiguity, the things that I just mentioned in the previous slide, here are some things that the group members need, or the group as a whole needs. Individual members need to be clear and understand their mission, the group's mission, purpose, and vision. Similarly, they have to have an understanding of their roles and responsibilities. In this phase, it's important that the group establish specific objectives and tasks if those have not already been set. And also establishing ground rules is important in this phase, which everyone should have some involvement with this. It's important that everyone understands the expectations that are set upon individual group members. So that might look like, how often are the meetings? Is there an attendance requirement? When I'm at a meeting, what is the processes involved here? So it's important to lay out those expectations. Leadership at this point should be providing structure and direction. They should be providing the opportunities for individual members to get to know each other, right? It's important that leadership sets the tone. So we all know that the effectiveness of a way a group operates or the productivity of the group has a lot to do with the leadership. And so the attitude, the mindset that the leader displays towards the work that needs to get done, towards the mission, their confidence in the group, members of a group often adopt the mindset, the attitude that the leadership exhibits. So it's important to inspire confidence and to be optimistic about the work that lays ahead. Leadership should also actively engage with individual members, right? Getting to know each individual member, their preferred communication style, a little bit about them, that goes a long way on a more personal level, but also in order to get the work done. You know, what motivates one person may not motivate another person. So being able to identify those things and tailor is really helpful. Okay. And of course, leadership should do what they can to provide the information and tools for the group to carry out its responsibilities. In order to move past this stage, here are some critical things that should happen. There should be a collaborative working spirit that is cultivated. Each member should operate with integrity. If you do something, follow through and get that done, pull your weight. Members should be aware and intentional about not taking things personally, focus on the work that needs to get done, and not necessarily looking at a critique as something that's a personal attack or something about the individual as a person. Individuals should be willing to get out of their comfort zone, and also the group should be prepared for conflict. Conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. It can lead to a bad thing, but if you know that conflict is a part of the group development process, then you're better equipped and ready to handle it when it arises. The storming phase. This is the phase where people are actually starting to work together, get the work done. The foundation has been laid. And so when work starts to get done, this is when you get to see for the first time people's interactional styles when it comes to work, okay? So common behaviors during this phase. The group as an entity starts to make sense of itself as a whole. People are expressing different viewpoints and exhibiting different ways of interacting with people. So communication styles, their viewpoints on time and attendance, all of these things start to become apparent. There may be some jockeying or vying for leadership. So even though there may be a formal leader for the group, there may be people among the members who are actually desiring to take a higher role or a different role in the group and become the leader. So there may be conflict here, power struggles. And again, these do not have to be negative things that stop the group process or impede the group process to the point where it feels like there's no hope for the group. Does not have to get to that point. There may be limited progress at this point because this is going to be, of all the different stages of the group, the most tumultuous if there is going to be tumult. And so if you're dealing with interactional styles, power struggles of things of that nature, you're not going to be able to get a lot of work done. And so if all this is going on, then group members may express concern about the work or the work actually getting done. Common thoughts of feelings. With all of that stuff going on, it's not surprising that there may be feelings of confusion, lack of clarity. People may be defensive. And also some people may lose interest and want to bow out of the group because of the frustrations and feeling like, okay, why am I here? What's going on here? Why is there so much disagreement and conflict? There may be fluctuating attitudes regarding other group members. So at one point you may think, oh, this person is the greatest person to work with, and I love working with them. And the next time you're working with them, they're the most frustrating person. You're still getting to know people at this point and learning their interactional styles and work styles. So again, this is not anything that can be prohibitive and totally stop the work that needs to get done or the group productivity. You should address it though. So here's a couple of questions and comments that might be thought of or asked by group members. Do I agree with the mission at this point and how we're going about getting things done? Are other members qualified to even be here? Where individuals may need to revisit the group's purpose, mission, objectives, as well as group members' roles, ensuring that everyone is clear on what those are. Also revisiting ground rules. If you've established ground rules initially, you can refer to those when there are disagreements, there are debates, anything is going on, they can be referred back to. At this point, it's important to identify individual group members' stylistic differences and their personal differences. So some of you have probably heard of the Myers-Briggs inventory, which is I believe it's a personality assessment. So if you're familiar with that, and you know that someone is an INTJ, I don't know if I have those letters correct, but if they tell you what their letters are, then automatically, if you're familiar with that inventory, then you have an idea of something about that person's personality and their work style, right? You may know if they're an introvert versus an extrovert, if they're a direct communicator versus an indirect communicator. If you have that knowledge, then you can better adjust your interactional style with them to do what is more conducive to both of you communicating, working together, and getting things done. At this stage, it's important for individual members to actively listen to each other, right? Actively listening, not being ready to respond so quickly to someone because you've got something that you're just dying to say, to the point where you're not even listening to what they have to say anymore because you're just waiting for them to finish, but really listening to what group members are saying with the goal of understanding what they're saying. Okay. Giving and receiving feedback is important. It is not always a comfortable thing to do, but it's important for group members to learn how to do this and be able to do this. And very important is being able to resolve conflict, because again, conflict is a natural part of group development. And so understanding how to deal with it when it arises is important. Having said that, then here are some things that are important for a leader to do. And I neglected to mention early on, when I say leader, this can be formal or informal. And when it comes to oversight entities, it may look different based upon however the entity is structured. If you're on a board or commission, there is typically a formal leader, right? The chair of the board or some other title, but someone who is formally designated the leader of the group. But there also are boards and commissions that have support from staff. And so staff who support boards and commissions may be a different type of leader for that entity. And so when I say leader, I'm thinking of anybody or any subgroup of individuals on boards and commissions who may have a leadership role. But whatever the role might be, if you're a leader in the group, it's important to acknowledge conflict. And so don't ignore it thinking, oh, nobody noticed that, or it'll go away on its own, it'll resolve on its own. Acknowledge it head on and deal with it. Introduce the concept of shared leadership. So shared leadership, if a group is progressing effectively, successfully through different stages, then the group members will assume more responsibility for the work that gets done and share some of the leadership that initially they are looking specifically to the leader to provide. And that next bullet, members assume more responsibility, goes hand in hand with the concept of shared leadership. It's important for the leadership to provide opportunities for group members to learn about conflict and also how to resolve conflict. What are the strategies and methods in order to do that? It's important for leadership to support group members, to be encouraging to them, and to acknowledge the work that they're contributing. And also to be actively involved in the whole group process, right? And that goes back to a leader modeling behaviors. If a group sees a leadership actively involved, then they are more likely themselves to be actively involved. In order to move past this phase, here are some key things that need to happen. There needs to be a refocus or focus on the overall group purposes and goals and objectives. Group members should be able to move from a mindset of having to test and prove that they're good enough to be there and that other members are good enough to be a part of the group to a problem-solving mindset, right? It's less about individual members, their personalities, their work style, and it's more about the work at hand. Group members should be able to accept feedback, constructive critiques, view suggestions as contributions and constructive feedback, as opposed to criticism of who they are as individuals or what they're contributing. Group members should respect the leadership that is in place and that is being offered and the guidance that's there, as well as the different interactional styles of all group members. Active listening is key and important. A willingness to trust is really critical. After all, you're working with a group of people, and there has to be some level of trust in each other to get the work done and the motives for being present. There has to be a way to successfully resolve conflict and to let go of the small stuff. So if something is kind of nagging at an individual about someone else or something about the group as a whole or the process that is in place, if it's more stylistic and not something that is prohibiting or preventing the work from getting done, then letting go of the small stuff is an option and might be the better option in some cases. The next phase is norming. And this phase is all about group cohesion. Okay. The group is coming up ways to get the work done. They've passed that tumultuous storming phase and are ready to establish norms among the group. So here are some common behaviors among this phase that you'll see among different group members. There's agreement on how things are getting done, the processes and the procedures that are being carried out. Interactions between group members. People have gotten to know each other at this point a little better, and so are more comfortable interacting with each other. There's a focus and energy on the tasks at hand rather than any of the previously experienced conflict or disagreements. Effective conflict resolution skills are being implemented. There is a sincere attempt to make consensual decisions. And so sincere is a key word here, right? It's not half-hearted. It's not some members are making decisions. It's a full engagement and people are sincerely coming to the table to try to come to agreement about decisions. There's more balance in the influence that individuals have among group members and within the group, and problem solving and decision-making is shared. The team has developed routines on how to get things done and just interactions in general, and milestones are set and achieved. Common thoughts and feelings. These are more feel-good thoughts compared to the previous two stages. So at this stage, if a group reaches it, there's more of a sense of belonging by individual members, as well as an acceptance of all members. Each individual member has a higher degree of confidence in what they're doing and their roles and responsibilities, and the group as a whole experiences a higher level of efficacy. So there's more confidence in each other and that, yes, we can do this as a group and get things done. There's the ability to express criticism constructively, not fearing or being apprehensive about doing so because there's safety, you know your group members at this point, and there's more of a freedom to express and contribute thoughts, feelings, ideas. And overall, there's more of a sense of trust among members. What does the group need at this stage? Well, individually and as a whole, there should be a well-developed decision-making process in place, whether it's consensus, majority, that should be explicitly thought about and decided on. Members should be prepared to offer ideas and suggestions at this point, as well as share among the problem-solving responsibilities. Okay. There should be shared leadership. And so what does that look like? So if there is conflict or a disagreement on the team, then the group members don't necessarily wait for the chairperson or the leader who is the formal leader to resolve it. It's okay to take the lead and to point something out. Hey, I noticed that there's disagreement here or there's conflict here. Let's pause for a minute and let's address that, right? So shared leadership, that's an example of what that looks like. Group members should have access to and be able to use available resources that they have in order to support the work that they're doing. Leadership. Shared leadership should be encouraged. Leadership should provide feedback and support to the group as a whole and individual members. There should continue to be opportunities to promote team interaction and to develop and build relationships among team members. The leadership should ensure that all members have the opportunity to contribute. So if some group members are more talkative or contributory than others, the leader should be intentional about asking all group members or the more quiet ones if they have anything to say or thoughts or comments that they would like to contribute. And there should be encouragement, encouraging others to be a part of the decision-making process, providing feedback and being actively involved. In order to move past this stage, you're in a good stage here if you make it here, but to get to the highest level where the work is really happening, individual members should be open to change. Now, sometimes people may resist that in this stage because by this point, you've established norms and it's comfortable to be here. And so we know that change sometimes brings discomfort, even if it's change for the better. So people should try to be open to change that is good for the group. Also, it's a good time to take a step back and look at the group processes that have been playing out and the level of productivity of the group, and just do an assessment of those things and make changes if necessary. If there's problems with the group processes or if there's limited productivity, really evaluate what's going on and make some changes if necessary. And the group should position itself to increase productivity. So if you're doing the previous thing, taking an assessment, evaluating, then you're working towards creating a situation where productivity and outputs are increased. The performing stage. So here is where we are cooking with gas. Not everybody or every group reaches this stage, okay? This is where everything is like a well-oiled machine and work is getting done. So alternative to not every group actually makes it to this phase, there are also groups that can get to this phase in a relatively short period of time. It doesn't take long for them to get there because they've done the work to address the issues that might arise in the previous stage, and they've been able to successfully manage the personalities, the interactions, processes, roles, responsibilities, all the other stuff was done. So this stage is a stage where the group as a whole and individual members are highly productive. And here are some common observable behaviors you might see from group members. It is fully functioning. So that means individuals are getting their work done, taking ownership of their responsibilities, and the group as a whole is doing that as well. And then subgroups, there might be subcommittees or subgroups within the larger group, and they're effectively working as well. You see group members relying on each other and trusting one another. You see the group making adjustments when necessary, right? And so this requires a high degree of flexibility and adaptability. It looks like group members being aware of and acknowledging other group members' strengths and weaknesses and tailoring work and support as a result of that. So here, the work is getting done, and it is typical that tight bonds among the group as a whole or individuals within the group, the tight bonds are formed and emerged. Common feelings and thoughts. These are typically, if all this stuff is going well, then the feelings and thoughts are positive, right? There's empathy for other group members. There's a high level of commitment to get the work done and to be a part of the group. There's an understanding of how to work cooperatively and collaboratively with each other. It can be fun and exciting to be a part of a group like this. There can be a high level of satisfaction being a member of the group and being proud of the work that is being accomplished. You can also be gaining a lot of skills personally in your own development as a professional and just as a contributing group member. And here you have and feel comfortable contributing ideas about how to sustain the momentum that the group is exhibiting. The group needs here. It's important at this point for the group to maintain team flexibility, right? To be comfortable with continuing to give and receive feedback with each other. Evaluating performances is really important. Just like in the previous stage, you want to take a look at what's working, what's not working, because you're all about how to keep that momentum going and keeping the level of productivity high. It's also important to continuously recognize the contributions of your group members, as well as validate what they're doing. And so leadership continues to emphasize shared leadership and ownership of the work of the group. Leadership observes and inquires about what the team needs, what to continue to be productive and move forward. And so they not only ask about those things, but they're responsive to those things and they fulfill those needs. Leadership offers positive reinforcement and support to group members, and they also recognize the contributions that group members make. Now, I'm going to spend just a little bit of time, because I want to leave time for questions on group member roles. Okay. There are generally 3 types of roles when you're working as a part of a group. You've got task roles, maintenance roles, and dysfunctional roles. And you'll see my little thumbs up signs or images beside task roles and maintenance roles, because those are the positive functional roles. The dysfunctional roles we're going to try to avoid, but a slide on each of these, and then we'll get to some questions. Task roles. So these roles can be official or unofficial. So someone can officially be assigned a specific task to do as they're a group member, or people, if you're a part of any group, you are unofficially taking on roles depending on who you are as a person, what you are comfortable with, what you're good at. And so people can also take on more roles than one, whether they are formal or informal roles. And also, the roles you take on or a member takes on can change over time, or they can change depending on which group that you're with at the time. So task roles. Initiator, contributor, that's essentially someone who contributes, right? Their ideas, suggestions, their the work that needs to get done. They propose solutions and are actively involved in decision making, and they come up with new ideas. The information seeker is someone who asks for information regarding whatever's being discussed at hand to ensure that factual information is being provided and clarification is there if needed. The information giver is the person who offers that factual information or sheds light on whatever is being discussed to ensure that everyone has a better context and understanding. Opinion seeker, this is someone who might ask what other people in the group think about certain things or decisions that are being made. And then the opinion giver is someone who states their beliefs, their opinions, relevant to whatever's being discussed. The elaborator / clarifier, there's someone who provides context. They may provide some historical knowledge about whatever's being discussed. They may offer or elaborate on a rationale for why a decision is being made. The coordinator is someone who connects the dots for the group, right? So they may coordinate or connect the dot between different pieces of information that other group members have shared with the group. They may connect the dots between different opinions that have been expressed, but they're the person who can kind of look at things individually and pull them together and see how they are linked and related to each other. The diagnostician is someone who points out any problems that may be occurring in the group and the need to address those issues so that the group can continue to move on to achieve their tasks. The summarizer, I really like this role. The summarizer is someone who periodically will pause and summarize what's been done up to that point, making sure that everyone has an understanding, everyone is on the same page, making sure that you're also staying on task. The energizer is someone who is kind of the energy for the group, right? They prod the group to continue to be productive and work on issues. They prod the group to take action. The recorder is the person who takes the notes. Very, very important role. The evaluator is someone who can constructively take a look at the group processes and work and analyze what's been going on and what the accomplishments have been. The procedural technician, another important role, is someone who handles the logistics and the routine tasks of the group. Maintenance role, another functional group of roles here. So again, this is similar to the previous roles. This can be unofficial, they can be unofficial. Individuals can take on more than one role, or they can change roles over time. So whereas the previous roles were focused on specific tasks, maintenance roles people who take on these roles, they're tending to other things and not just the tasks. So they're tending to people, the group members, and and what interactions is going on, what needs to happen in order for people to feel like they're a part of the group, they have an opportunity to express themselves, those sort of things. So here you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the common maintenance roles. So the encourager is someone who offers praise or acknowledgement for what someone is contributing. They offer warmth and solidarity with other group members. The harmonizer is someone who is able to come in and help reconcile differences when they arise or disagreements between members. There's someone who can reduce tensions among the group. The tension reliever, although the harmonizer can reduce tension, the tension reliever is focused specifically on that. And so oftentimes in groups, this can show up by someone being humorous to ease the tension. Their role is to kind of try to relax group members. The conciliator is someone who works to maintain group cohesion. Okay, so they offer ideas and suggestions with ways to resolve conflicts or disagreements. They're the person who acknowledges their errors or mistakes that are made because they understand, hey, it's helpful to take ownership of that so that other people know that I'm here to contribute, and so they're willing to do that. A gatekeeper is a part of a group. They can ensure that communication channels remain open. And so this is important for some of your quieter group members. The gatekeeper is the person who ensures that they have an opportunity and they're explicitly asked if they have anything to contribute or want to say. The follower, this is not a negative thing. The follower, we all can't be the top chef in the kitchen, right? There has to be people who are willing to do the work, let others take the lead in different areas, and be willing to just help contribute to getting the work done. And then the feeling expresser. This is someone who explicitly acknowledges the feelings, the moods, and the relationships among group members. Doesn't have to be touchy-feely, but it is important that if we're focused on relationships and understanding that relationships are important in any group to get the work done, then it is important to acknowledge individuals' feelings and any difficulties, challenges, or even the positive things that people may be feeling. Now, this last slide, the dysfunctional roles, we want to stay away from these. And if you've ever been on a group, a part of a group, you've seen the task roles, you've experienced maintenance roles, and I am sure that you've experienced and observed dysfunctional roles as well. And so high-performing teams, the ones that get to the performing stage, they're able, if they are at that stage and have shared leadership, everybody takes the responsibility to address the dysfunctional role, not just waiting on the formal leader of the group to do that. So these roles really quickly. The blocker, this is someone who interferes with the progress of the group. They may reject ideas, they may take negative stances on any suggestions that are brought up on issues that are discussed. So rather than saying, how can we get this done? Or how can I get to an understanding of this? They just kind of shut it down immediately. The aggressor is someone who might struggle for status among the group, and they do so by deflating the status of other people. They can be boastful and braggadocious, and they may be critical in a non-constructive way of other members and the work that is or is not getting done. The deserter is someone who withdraws from the group in some way. So that may be physically, or even if they're still present in a meeting or during an event, they may be indifferent, they may be aloof, and they just may be disengaged. The dominator, this is someone who interrupts others, they try to monopolize the group's time, and they oftentimes attempt to present as the authority of the group. Recognition seeker, they're people who are a part of the group for the wrong reasons. And so they're not necessarily there to contribute to the work and achieve the mandates that the group has, but they're there for attention. They're there for the status, to say that they're a part of this particular group without actually putting in the work that is required of the group. A defensive member, when there are errors, missed deadlines, unfulfilled responsibilities, this person blames others rather than taking ownership for their part in all of those things, okay? They maybe see themselves as the victim or the scapegoat and being picked on unjustly. The quiet member. A quiet member is not necessarily a bad thing. It's on this list when the quiet member is quiet to the extent that they're not contributing in any way, okay? So some people are naturally quiet during meetings and discussions, and I can be one of those people depending on what the group is discussing. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to contribute. So it becomes dysfunctional if I'm checked out, really not paying attention, and can kind of be in line with what a deserter is. And then finally, the internal leader. So the internal leader is someone who is not formally the leader, or they're not even really contributing to the shared leadership of an effective group. An internal leader internally wants to be the authority, wants to be the leader of the group. This is an unspoken desire. And so they act on that in ways that sabotage the group or the formal leadership of the group. So going back to, if your group has reached the high functioning level, that performing stage, then there is shared leadership, and the group itself is able to address these dysfunctional roles rather than waiting on the formal leadership of the group to do so. So that's ideally where you want to be. I'm going to stop it here and take some questions.
Thank you so much for that, Tina. And we do have some questions for you. So let's start with a fairly basic one. There are quite a few people who are interested to know if this slide deck will be available for reference after the meeting.
In addition to the recording that we
Yes.
have? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. Make that happen.
Okay. Thank you so much.
High functioning, so yes.
The next question is, it seems difficult for people to enter into the process of civilian oversight without their own personal biases. Sometimes this can interfere with the work. Can you discuss how you carry out the mandate while still honoring the beliefs of others?
Yeah, so that there has to be, or it is best if everyone comes to the table from the very beginning. And I know that oversight entities have, new members come, other members, their time expires on the board. So the ideal situation is to have everyone in the room from the very beginning. And so this is why when we do trainings, we say, you know what, you may not be sympathetic to everybody who has a role or is a stakeholder in oversight, but it's important to have them at the table if possible, from the very beginning. Because if you can establish the relationship and some level of trust, it doesn't have to be absolute trust, but a general sense of trust from the very beginning, things will go more smoothly in the long run. For boards and commissions that have already been established, this is where it's important, where if you're recognizing conflict, if you're recognizing that there are people who are just digging in their heels, then the remaining group members who are open to working with each other, it may be a situation where you have someone on the group who's not willing to meet you there, but it's important to still get the work done. So the remaining group members may have to problem solve. It's also, if your board or commission has access to resources, right? It may be that someone who is objective comes in to help facilitate discussions, to facilitate dialogue, to address the conflict as an outside person. For those of you who have support from your cities or your county government, it may be worthwhile to find out if there are resources to bring someone in like that, or who already works for the county or local government who has a role in doing that. I know some places have training departments and other resources, but it is challenging, but it is really important that those conflicts and the differences in opinions, the different people with very varying sides, come to the table if at all possible and have discussion. And the work may need to stop in order to get to that point. There may have to be a pause to do that.
Wonderful. And if you don't mind, Tina, staying a couple minutes over, we do have quite a few questions. People, I think, are just now really coming to all of the things that have been in their minds while they've been doing this work.
Wow.
So the next question in the queue was how you deal with a saboteur. And I think that you've kind of started to address that. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I'll just reiterate the importance of shared leadership. And so ideally, if a group gets to that norming stage and that performing stage, everyone has a sense of ownership and does not wait for someone else to take care of the problem. Yes, you want to respect the formal leadership that's in place, but if one person notices some sabotaging behavior, guaranteed other people notices it well. There's no reason. We're all, professionals. We should be able to address those things as a group. And because if it's not addressed, then it's not going to be resolved. And so you don't want one person to kind of create a problem and the work doesn't get done because of whatever the issue is. But it's important for that group, the concept of group leadership to be into play, not just the concept, but an active thing that's happening.
Thank you for that. So another around the same topic, another question was, with groups that have volunteers who come and go, you often have people on staggered terms. It seems that there can be multiple stages intermixed, thus lending to great difficulty. Would you have any suggestions in how to deal with this reality? It reminds the person who's posed the question reminds them of grief stages, but intermixed.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. It's very similar, the types of the way that it's nonlinear, right? So a group may get to the performing stage. When some group members fall off because their time expires and other new members are coming on board, guess what? You're going back to some of the earlier stages. You may not, go back to the tumult, but you're going to go back to some of the earlier stages because now you've introduced new individuals to the group. And so for those new individuals, they're entering something, a working group that they may not know anybody on the group, or they may know very few people. They may think they have an idea of what is required, their responsibilities, but you all know that once you're starting, once you've joined a group, there's so much that you learn that you didn't know before. So the group as a whole, going back to focusing on establishing relationships, ensuring individual members have what they need in order to fulfill their responsibilities. I would say when group members start, it is important to train them, get them on board, help them understand their roles, responsibilities, the work that's required, the mandates that are required of the group. I also think it's important for the leadership of the group to offer an opportunity a little informally for the new group members to meet, get to know the existing group members, and vice versa. Because yes, the existing group members may not need all the training and information because they've gotten to a point where they understand all that, they're operating smoothly. But the relationship piece, if we're talking about group work and the importance of relationship, then there should be some time for all group members to get to know each other a little bit.
So that leads into the next question. So we actually have a couple of people who have posed questions around the following. How can we include exercises or events, sometimes even discussions, to improve group dynamics when we have to comply with public meeting laws and can't just meet for fun or team building?
How can you comply or create opportunities for that?
Yes, because most of them in many states, if more than half of them are together, they have the issue of having a quorum. And so then it must be a agendized public meeting.
So take, for instance, if there are some opportunities where you're not just having a meeting, and when I think of oversight entities, we promote community engagement. And so if there are events that you're doing with communities, and even if it's, not necessarily an educational event, but it's more so engaging with the community because the group also wants to establish some kind of ties to the community and being an active community member. If group members attend those types of events, you're not necessarily having an agenda, going through certain things. You're still doing the work, but you're doing it in a less formal environment. So your level of and your type of interaction is going to look differently if you're out there in the community participating in an event, as opposed to you're having an official board meeting. I don't know, Cammie, I don't know if, like, just off the top of your head, I'm less familiar with.
Well, I can say that for some of the groups, boards and commissions that we've worked with, almost all of them have that issue where they may want to do some work on group dynamics, either because they want to just make sure they have a strong group dynamic, or they may have issues that they'd like to work out. And unfortunately, if more than, say, on a 9-member board, if more than 4 of them are together at any given time, then they're violating the public meeting law. So one of the things that we've done is to do training like this in a public forum, because I think it also helps the public and community to know that the board's receiving this kind of training, that they're taking this kind of work very seriously. And group dynamics, particularly when you're talking about a board that does as of important as work as civilian oversight, that this should be part of that training. It's just as important as some of the other training that is received. And so I think that being able to do that part publicly, so that if there are things that need to be then worked out, some of the times that can happen in smaller groups, but as long as the group itself has received the training, has been able to talk about it. And Tina, you and I also work with groups who occasionally do have some of these conversations in their public meeting, and are sometimes reminded of how maybe things could be handled differently or more productively. Sometimes helping people lift them up to different roles in the group. And it's not bad that those things are happening in a public forum necessarily. I think it also, personally, I would say that I think that it helps often mimic the type of behavior that you would like law enforcement to use when communicating and working with others. So although, open meeting laws are very valuable, they do make things like this sometimes different, but that doesn't mean that they exclude this from happening.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Kimmy.
Of course. And I think we have time for one more question. Unfortunately, we won't get to everybody's question today, but I'm very appreciative of all of these amazing questions that have been put in the queue. So the next one is can you speak to the potential dynamic where the presence of effective board staff, so someone comes in to actually staff the board, is diminished, results in diminished board engagement rather than enhanced engagement?
Okay, so that is my thought. Well, my initial thought is I think like what stage of the process the group might be in. If we're looking at the 4 stages, then where in the process is that group? And so let me see if I can get back to just a little diagram. Okay, so if we're looking at the 4 stages, depending on what stage the group is in, my response would be different. So definitely in the beginning, the staff may know more. The individuals who are assigned to staff provide those responsibilities may know more about what's required, what's allowed, the resources available. But over time, of course, ideally, the group as a whole relies less on the staff. So if the group is stuck in not taking ownership, that shared leadership, not taking responsibility for some of the responsibilities of the group as a whole, or not taking ownership of the group, then there should be, even if it has to be an explicit thing, an understanding of what the expectation is. So I could be a group member. Say I'm a member of a group that is really kind of deferring to the staff that's assigned. And I may never have vocalized this, but I might be thinking, oh, I don't want to step on that person's toes. And so I'm assuming that they're just going to continue doing what they're doing. Whereas that person may be thinking, why isn't this group taking on more responsibilities and ownership of the tasks that have to be done? So a very basic thing that I'm thinking of doing is having a conversation about what the expectation is at this point. We've accomplished this to date, or we're at this point in the board has been established for this long. So it's a good time to revisit, and I'm talking like I'm talking to the group. So it's a good time to revisit where we are, what we've accomplished, and our processes. And so during that conversation, there can be a conversation or a discussion about, okay, here's what we need to tweak a little bit. The board should take more responsibility for this, this, and this. And I'm still here as the leader, the staff supporting the group to provide support, to provide help. But I think having just a conversation about what the expectations are, or what the group would like, the group as well as the staff, where it would like to be, would be helpful. But I think the conversation has to be brought up. And I'll say, it's not always comfortable bringing up these types of things, but it's necessary in order to move forward. And so if there's frustration on the part or confusion on the part of the staff about why this board isn't engaging or doing anything, or vice versa, then I think a discussion is always going to be the best way to clear the air and to get an understanding. Now, if the board is kind of the deserters, like the dysfunctional roles that were on that last slide, if they're withdrawn, if they're deserting, if they're just don't want to be involved, or some members, then that's a different conversation that needs to be had. But I would first look at, does the board understand that, hey, it's okay to take on some of these responsibilities and not be so overly heavily relying on the staff to take care of things.
That's great. Thank you for that, Tina. Yeah, those conversations about delineation of roles and expectations are never easy, but so helpful.
Work is hard. You're working with a lot of different personalities, a lot of different positions on a lot of different areas. And so people can either individually dig in to their positions, their stances, and remain closed, or they can be open to to hearing others, to be willing to work with others, and to meet in the middle somewhere. People do not have to agree 100% on everything. Group members do not. But the willingness to come to the table to focus on the group work and the mandates that have to get done, as opposed to personal stances and other things that could be barriers to getting the work done, is important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for today, Tina. And also thank you for all the work that you are going to be doing for the oversight community moving forward. We're very lucky to have you. And of course, I also need to thank all of our audience who joined us today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us and talk about this very important topic, but one that we don't always address. And I think that it's about time that we start moving this up on the list a bit. For all of those of you still out in our audience, there is still one more event in the 2023 NACOLE webinar series. It is still open for registration. And because you've joined us today, you can simply add that session to your existing registration by modifying it. More information about the event can be found on the NACOLE website. I also want to ask all of you to watch your inboxes for information regarding our virtual training events that will be happening this December. There will be 2 days of virtual sessions dedicated to police oversight and 2 days dedicated to jail and prison oversight. This event is separate from our annual conference, which will be taking place November 12th through the 16th in Chicago. If you have not already registered for the conference, we suggest that you do so soon. It is filling up very quickly at this point. And if please be on the lookout for when the training sessions in December open for registration. Thank you again to all of you for being with us today, and we look forward to being with you next time.
Thank you.